Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab, all on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third Annual Sahel Summit. We are delighted that you can join us for this important discussion. My name is Mvemba Pezo Dizolele. I'm a senior fellow and the director of the Africa Program here at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This event is made possible through a partnership with the European Union mission to the United States. We would like to thank the European Union for their generous support. I'm honored to welcome our distinguished speakers and panelists. His Excellency Stavros Lambrinidis, Ambassador of the European Union to the United States. His Excellency Philippe Etienne, Ambassador of France to the United States. His Excellency Maman Sambo Sidikou, High Representative of the African Union for Mali and the Sahel, the Honorable Emanuela Claudia Del Rey, European Union Special Representative for the Sahel, and Mr. Michael Gonzalez, United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. This is the third year in a row that we are hosting the Sahel Summit. So why are we here? Obviously, the level of insecurity in the Sahel is alarming and worrisome. Simply put, the international efforts to fight Islamist insurgency and militancy have not met the expectations of the Sahelian populations. The current approach to addressing insecurity, which is military-centered, has not restored calm to the region. The jihadist insurgency continues to gain new ground. Communal violence is on the rise, and security, development, and good governance remain elusive. We also have noted high levels of erosion of public confidence in government across the region. From Burkina Faso to Mali to Niger to Chad, the region has experienced a turbulent decade shaped by constitutional and military coups and other turbulent political and social events. And states are struggling to honor and uphold the social contract. The Sahel is also grappling with the pressures of climate change. Meanwhile, strategic coordination among international partners remains challenging, as is often the case in situations like the one the Sahel faces. So we ask a few questions, including one, is it time to adjust the international approach, which is military-centered, and instead focus on governance reforms, public service delivery, and fiscal transparency? And two, is it time to expand the international partnerships framework, which is state and government-centered, to include greater participation of civil society organizations? The speakers today will take stock of the current instability and identify opportunity to strengthen political, security, and development efforts, and explore practical policy options to address the crisis. Our program today will proceed as follows. First, we will hear opening remarks by Ambassadors Stavros Lambrinidis and Philippe Etienne. Then we'll hear from our panelists, and finally, we will open the lines for questions from the audience. Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis has been the ambassador of the European Union to the United States since March 1st, 2019. From 2012 to February 12, 2019, he served as the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. In 2011, he was Foreign Affairs Minister of Greece. Between 2004 and 2011, he was twice elected member of the European Parliament with the Greek Social Democratic Party. Ambassador Lambrinidis, please. Ambassador, you're on mute, please, if you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, you see, we're all hoping the pandemic would be over by now, and we wouldn't have to remember how to unmute ourselves and do our cameras, but not working this way. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and viewers who are connecting from the United States, from Europe, from Africa, and beyond. Let me start by conveniently quoting my boss, the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, who in his latest blog about the upcoming EU-AU summit wrote, quote, COVID-19, climate change, terrorism. Many challenges threaten both Africa and Europe. Yet there are countless opportunities available to us as well. Only together can we move forward better and faster, but there is now an urgent need to accelerate the pace, taking inspiration from the Olympic motto, faster, stronger, higher. Now, as a Greek, you understand the Olympic motto business. I particularly like that reference of the High Representative. Now, friends, as we sit here today, the rise of violent extremism and the worsening of the humanitarian situation in the Sahel and the wider West Africa region is threatening the future of the entire African continent and of all of us. This is as high stakes as it gets. So it should come as no surprise that at the EU-US summit of last June, the presidents of the United States and the European Union highlighted a joint interest to support our partners in the Sahel in building stability and prosperity in the region. So I'm especially pleased that the European Union Delegation of the United States is again partnering with CSIS to organize the third edition of the Sahel Summit. It is more important than ever that we keep this high on our agenda and do all that we can to push for effective responses. I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate you, Mvemba Fezo Dizilele, for your nomination as director of the CSIS Africa Program. The Sahel region of Africa is and will continue to be a top priority for the European Union and its member states. The EU is engaged in the Sahel region via all its instruments. Global EU aid to the 5 Sahel countries over the period 2014-2020 has amounted to close to 5 billion euros and 8.5 billion euros if we include the aid provided by the 27 EU member states. EU aid covers, this is important, all sectors and is delivering results in areas such as basic social services, health, education, nutrition, water, sanitation, governance, rule of law, such as justice, police, democratization, fiscal transparency, as well as economic resilience, agricultural transformation, and infrastructure and energy. Civil society, gender equality, and climate action are mainstream throughout. This, dear friends, is a holistic, strategic engagement. Now, the EU has also deployed 3 what we call common security and defense policy missions in the Sahel. These actions have mobilized more than 1,000 men and women to provide training and capacity building to military and police forces in the Sahel. And on the 13th of December, the EU also adopted a set of restrictive measures against Russia's Wagner Group. Now, last year in April, most importantly, the EU and its 27 member states adopted a new strategy for the Sahel, committing to supporting the Sahel countries in overcoming the current security, governance, and humanitarian crises. Our new EU strategy emphasizes the importance of both short-term stabilization and long-term prospects for sustainable social, environmental, and economic development beyond military involvement. The EU will also continue strengthening the multilateral system with the United Nations as its core, alongside regional organizations, especially the African Union, ECOWAS, and the G5 Sahel. In that context, the EU welcomes the decision taken by the US last year to join the efforts of the Coalition for the Sahel, which was created in 2020, as you all know, to provide a more collective and inclusive response to the Sahel crisis. Dear friends, as I close, please allow me a few short shout-outs. As a former EU Special Representative for Human Rights, as you noted, I am particularly pleased that we are joined today by a woman who is leading the implementation of the new EU strategy in the Sahel in coordination with the 27 member states. our new EU Special Representative for the Sahel, Emanuela Del Rey. She took up her new role in July 2021, so it's relatively recent. And her impressive experience and immense dedication to the Sahel and Africa will be key to delivering on the EU and our member states' support to our partners in the region. And please forgive me another special shout out for my personal friend, the French ambassador in the United States, Philippe Etienne. Next month, on the occasion of the European Union African Union Heads of State Summit, the EU and the AU will open a new chapter of their relations with the adoption of a new partnership between our two continents. And France, of course, is holding the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. I am also delighted to count today on the participation of a man who plays a crucial role of advancing US policies in West Africa and in the Sahel, Mike Gonzalez, the US Deputy Assistant Secretary for West Africa. Mike, thank you personally for the close and excellent working relationship that you have developed with the EU, including with the EU delegation here in Washington. And finally, as the latest developments in the Sahel have proven, our joint efforts can only bear fruit with our partners in the Sahel and in Africa in the driving seat. That is why I am so pleased that we have here today Maman Siddiqui, the African Union High Representative for Mali and for the Sahel. His leadership will be crucial to win this fight against violent extremism and poverty, and to effectively promote people's aspirations for a better future. So, dear friends, I hope Josep Borrell's words can perhaps inspire today's event. It's not only about countering crises, but also about grabbing by the horns the vast, hopeful opportunities about the Sahel's future. Indeed, I would submit to you, concrete, achievable hope for the future is often the best motivator for resolving the crises of the present. Together, Europe, the United States, and Africa must move forward better and faster in the Sahel and elsewhere. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you for having me with you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lambrinidis. Ambassador Philippe Etienne is the ambassador of France to the United States. He previously held numerous posts within the Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, notably as ambassador of France to Romania from 2002 to 2005, director of the cabinet of the Minister of Foreign and European Affairs from 2007 to 2009, permanent representative of France to the European Union from 2009 to 2014, ambassador of France to Germany from 2014 to 2017, and most recently, diplomatic advisor to the president from 2017 to 2019. Your Excellency, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues and friends, I would like first to thank CSIS for this invitation and for the opportunity to meet with all of you. Unfortunately, not in person. I will present the priorities of the new French presidency of the EU Council with respect to Africa, and then the importance of Sahel for France and the EU, which have been working for years to foster stability and development together with the countries in the region. As Stavros said, France began its 6 months presidency of the EU Council on January 1st. Africa will be a priority for our presidency, with an EU-AU summit in Brussels on February 17th and 18th. That event will be the only one to include both EU heads of state and government and those of non-EU countries during our semester of presidency. It will be an opportunity to launch a new European-African alliance, focusing on 3 areas: shared prosperity, denser orderly movement between our 2 continents, and stepped up continental security. The summit will allow us to reaffirm the European Union and African Union's roles, respective roles, as leading partners, one for the other. With regard to public health, the EU has made and will continue to make a massive effort to support African countries. It is a major challenge to international cooperation and global health. To date, Europe has pledged to donate 700 million doses of mRNA vaccine in the most vulnerable countries by mid-2022. More than 145 million doses have already been delivered, a large portion of them to Africa, including 14 million out of 32 promised to Africa, already delivered by France to 35 countries in Africa. The EU-AU Summit will underscore our desire to strengthen Africa's sovereignties in the areas of health and vaccines, as we show already with projects developing with Senegal and South Africa. I would now like to move on to the second half of my talk regarding France and the EU's commitments in the Sahel. We have made a long-term commitment to the Sahel. It is structural and coherent in its approach. It is focused first, indeed, on security concerns with the aim of combating terrorist groups. In January 2013, at the express request of Mali, France intervened in that country with UN approval to prevent Bamako from being captured by armed terrorist groups. Since 2013, French troops have been training and equipping Mali and other countries' armed forces with the goal of enabling them to operate independently. France is also participating in the EU's military mission in Mali, EUTM Mali, the Takuba Task Force, and MINUSMA. The EU Takuba Task Force was established in 2020 and is composed of European special forces, including already 650 men from 12 European nations. As President Macron said in October, France's goal in Mali is indeed to train those African forces to function independently so that eventually they will be able to defend their own territories and their own people against those groups. That said, France will not abandon Mali or the other Sahel countries. This past July, we made a significant change to the format of Operation Barkhane in order to adapt to the changing threat, as we are witnessing an upsurge in activity by terrorist groups in the so-called three-border region straddling Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. At the request of African nations, France is continuing to combat these armed groups in the Sahel with a very precious support from the United States, together with national armies and the G5 Sahel Joint Force, and as well as, of course, MINUSMA. Our engagement in the Sahel also involves a number of development projects benefiting local populations. For decades, France has been carrying out numerous projects in the Sahel with the French development agency AFD. When it comes to France's development policy, which targets 19 priority countries, the 5 G5 Sahel countries are among those priority countries. Official development assistance to the G5 Sahel countries has therefore increased steadily in recent years. In 2020, more than 500 million euros were earmarked for that purpose. France has belonged to the Sahel Alliance, created to foster international cooperation and improve the effectiveness of development assistance in the Sahel since it was launched in 2017. French projects are also coordinated through the Coalition for the Sahel. After several years of intervention, it is legitimate to question the results achieved by us in the Sahel, given that the fight against terrorist groups, in spite of its successes, is still going on and involves, as you said in your introduction, considerable challenges. These challenges include fighting corruption and improving governance, restoring the rule of law in certain regions, rebuilding the trust of the people who often feel abandoned, and reestablishing the authority of central governments, ensuring access to basic services, healthcare, and education. Young recruits who join this terrorist organization are doing this not necessarily because they want to engage in jihad, but also because they have no other prospects. To conclude, stabilizing the Sahel in the long term will take time, and there's a long way to go. We must together, and we must continue together our efforts and our cooperation to benefit local population. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Etienne, and thank you again to our speakers, both Ambassadors Etienne and Ambassador Lambrinidis. I would like now to move to the second part of our event and introduce our panelists. We will speak in the order that with their bios. Ambassador Mama Sambo Sidikou is a diplomat and former Nigerian politician. He is currently the High Representative of the African Union for Mali and the Sahel. From 2011 to 2014, he served as Niger's ambassador to the United States. He then oversaw the United Nations peacekeeping effort in Democratic Republic of Congo from 2015 to 2018. Most recently, between 2018 and 2021, Ambassador Sidikou served as Executive Secretary of the G5 Sahel, an institutional framework for coordination of regional cooperation in West Africa. European Union Special Representative Emanuela Claudia Del Rey was appointed for the Sahel on July 1st, 2021. Ms. Del Rey is an Italian national with a long academic career, having conducted extensive research in conflict areas in the Middle East, Central Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. She is a member of the Italian Parliament, and she served as Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Michael Gonzalez joined the Bureau of African Affairs in October 2020. His portfolio covers West Africa and regional peace and security. He previously served as the Director for Analysis of Africa in the State Department Bureau of Intelligence and Research. A career member of the Senior Foreign Service, Mike previously served as Deputy Chief of Mission and Chargé d'Affaires ad interim at the US embassies in Kathmandu, Nepal, and Lilongwe, Malawi. We will now give the floor to Ambassador Sidikou. You are muted, Ambassador, if you please.
Yes,
thank you.
Right. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, member. Thank you to colleagues, and particularly I would like to recognize Ambassador Lambrinidis, Ambassador Etienne, my dear friend Emanuela Del Rey, mon cher Michael. Let me just say this, member, as you know, I can talk because that's oral tradition. But I promised myself that I'd be as short as possible based on the questions you sent me, so that we have time also to discuss a bit about the situation, not only here, but in Sahel as a whole, and also look into perspective and what could be done. You were asking me, particular, how would I assess the Sahel crisis today and mark up an approach that is more responsive to reality. And my own view on this is that there are different ways to look at the situation. For the sake of clarity, I will only use security and development as vantage points. Security was an issue in the Sahara before 9/11. And several rebellions took place, including my beloved Niger, and were defeated. 10 years ago exactly, a dramatic change took place. A loose coalition of armed men calling for self-determination or Sharia-based institutions attacked a few cities in northern Mali, Kidal, etc. Seen as we call it the latest front on the global war on terror, this crisis has prompted an unprecedented military deployment. The groups of the organization were mentioned earlier, from Barkhane to the UN mission to our own G5 Sahel and national forces. However, as the unrest spread from the Sahara to the Sahel, so-called marginal development, and I'm talking about the development part, reached the center of a country, but only marginal developments. At times, rather than describing our situation as a crisis, I look at the Sahel as a region in flux. Major trends, change our societies, demographics, various dramatic components, mobility, including some people riding motors, education or lack of it, just to name a few. While there is a mismatch between citizen demand and state supply or delivery, we all know that the Sahel goes through a major transition where most of yesterday's truths are no longer valid. Therefore, I truly believe we need to think and act differently. Fostering Sahelian agency, creating shared prosperity, but also was mentioned earlier by Ambassador Lambridinis, and ensuring that actual devolution works on ground. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sidikou. EU Special Representative Del Rey, mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Ambassador Lambrinidis for his generous words. Thank you very much. Also, I want to welcome Ambassador Etienne for his remarks on the French presidency. And of course, I want to salute Maman Sidikou, mon ami, and Mike Gonzalez, with whom we cooperate very often. Certainly, what Maman Sidikou just said is very important because, of course, it puts in a framework the situation in the Sahel under different perspectives. And this is the most important thing, to be capable of looking at the issues in different angles. Of course, the European Union, you know, has developed a new integrated strategy for the Sahel, together with the countries of the Sahel, in which I would just want to summarize a couple of political points, especially principles, inspiring principles. One is mutual accountability, which is obviously declined in two ways. One is certainly mutual accountability between the countries of the Sahel, but in my interpretation is also a question of mutual accountability between the Sahel and the European Union. The other principle is ownership. Ownership is fundamental, and this is probably what we all aim for in all our efforts in the region and in our cooperation. I want to say that this integrated approach is certainly shared by not only the European Union in general, but also, for instance, the Coalition for the Sahel that has been established to coordinate the efforts on security and stability with the ones on development. I just want to tell you very briefly, because time is running, that we need to support the return of the state. The key word is definitely governance in our strategy. I want to say that the most important thing is that we need to restore the trust between the state and the population. This is to make sure that we create a social contract that can really reflect the opportunity for the society of Sahel to advance and to create opportunities for the future. In this sense, I just want to make a note on the fact that when we look at the region, of course, at the moment we're all focused on Mali, and I will say a word on our position on the situation of Mali, but we have to think about the whole countries of the Sahel, and I have to say that each has a different situation with the lights and also shadows, of course. But I want to also say that we should look at the region not as a stagnating situation only, but also as an opportunity and, of course, based on a very vibrant civil society and opportunities in terms of economy, and especially the human capital, which is constituted by the youth, for instance, that we should take into consideration. Burkina Faso has just changed the government. Chad is in the middle of a transition. Niger has developed through President Bazoum a vision for education and reform of security. Mauritania has its own balances, of course, as regards the way of contrasting the security issues. Of course, Mali at the moment is going through a specific situation, which, especially after the decision of ECOWAS to impose the sanctions that were actually consequent to their inability to provide credible responses to the demands of the international communities, not only the ECOWAS, to provide a credible chronogram for a transition. I just want to say that, in conclusion, that the position of the European Union must be coherent and must show the firmness in asking for concrete and acceptable responses by the Malian authorities, especially considering that we need to see an advancement for the population of Mali. At the same time, however, I want to tell you that we are aware of the fact that we need to keep Mali engaged and not isolated. We must keep the dialogue open and alive, holding the transition authorities to their commitment. Of course, firmness means adopting, also at European level, even in individual sanctions. Openness at the same time means continuing the diplomatic action, which is the essence of the European Union's approach to foreign relations. Of course, this is one important issue that is determining the destinies of the whole region, and I have noticed in the last few days that there is a huge engagement on the part of the international community, in particular the European Union, and of course by the whole countries of the G5. This makes me feel that we could probably aspire to a positive conclusion of all this, but we have all to continue our immense efforts in the region, which are constituted by a huge amount of projects in all domains, in all aspects of society, in security, and this obviously demonstrates that there is a real will, and will is the motor, the engine of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, EU Special Representative Del Rey. Das Mike Gonzalez. Mike is yours. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, Mbemba. I want to thank you, CSIS, and the EU mission for hosting and organizing this event. I'm honored to share this virtual dais with my friends and counterparts, Maman and Emanuela, as well as the honorable ambassadors, Lambrinidis and Etienne. While we often focus on the security issues in the Sahel, insecurity and instability often result from the absence, or at least the ineffectiveness, of state presence. They're symptoms of long-standing grievances, underdevelopment, and increased resource competition, all of which is antagonized by the injection of external funds, weapons, and extremist ideology. And we have to admit that despite a decade of robust international investments, the region continues to trend in the wrong direction. Armed groups continue to expand their presence as well as their capabilities and their violence, and countering this expansion is critical. But the United States and the Sahel's international partners recognize the limitations of an overwhelmingly security-focused approach. We need to address the underlying drivers of insecurity more holistically in order to turn the tide. Let me be clear. Sahelian governments must take the lead in addressing key governance deficits and improving security. International partners' role is to enable, support, and sometimes cajole that. We heard that from Emanuela talking about ownership, from Maman talking about bolstering Sahelian agency. In Mali, that means making the crucial political reforms and quickly holding free and fair elections to return to democratic governance. Unfortunately, ECOWAS's imposition of new sanctions just this week highlights growing international skepticism over the transition authorities' commitments and their longer-term intentions. In Chad, we're cautiously optimistic about the progress towards an inclusive national dialogue next month, and we continue to push for a peaceful and timely transition. But as Emanuela and Maman also said, there are bright spots worthy of mention. Last year's democratic transition in Niger was a powerful example for the region, and President Bazoum is focused on an ambitious agenda of social development and equity. In Burkina Faso, allegations of human rights abuses by security forces have fallen drastically in the past year, demonstrating an improvement of the engagement and the respect for and protection of civilians. And in Mauritania, new legislation makes it easier for civil society organizations to register and operate, a significant advancement towards increasing political inclusion. The United States recognizes that we must coordinate more actively and persistently, not only across US government agencies, but certainly with international and Sahelian partners. And we must prioritize our interventions, both functionally and geographically. We must be honest with ourselves that we can't do everything, and we can't even do those key things absolutely everywhere. We need to prioritize. Helping Sahelian governments improve equitable service delivery, including justice and dispute resolution, is central to boosting state credibility in the eyes of their citizens. African institutions and regional architectures, including ECOWAS and the G5 Sahel, must play central positions in international efforts. The United States and our international community partners will continue to provide direct support and relief to address security, humanitarian, and development imperatives. But the most important role of the international community, I would argue, should be to support, to enable, and build that longer-term African institutional capacity and agency. In the security sector, we continue to focus on building the capabilities of Sahelian forces to defend citizens and uphold human rights, all while facilitating increased regional cooperation, including with coastal West African countries. But we realistically, with finite resources available, we must increase our coordination to collectively prioritize, deconflict, and invest in key enabling projects and institutions. And for this reason, the United States is formally requesting this month to join the Sahel Alliance as a full member in order to better bolster that cooperation. We look forward to increased coordination with Sahelian governments and the Alliance members. With these few words, I'll stop and look forward to questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Das Gonzalez. So let's move to the discussion portion of this. My first question is really for Ambassador Maman Sambo Sidikou. Ambassador Sidikou, nearly a decade after the French military intervened to fight the jihadists in Mali, and after France led an international coalition to address the Islamist militancy in the region, two things are clear. While military operations have achieved some remarkable successes, the security crisis is far from over, as the insurgency score their own gain on the ground. Two, the security crisis is a reflection, as all of you have mentioned in different forms, if not an extension of a much larger crisis of governance across the region, which fuels the conflict. This reality calls for a new approach to the situation, one that demands and focuses on urgent reforms. As a former head of the United Nations mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you are no stranger to multidimensional crises. How would you assess the Sahel crisis today and map out an approach that is more responsive to the reality? I know it's quite a lot there, but you can handle it, I'm sure.
Actually, I jumped the gun, so to speak, and responded to this question earlier because I didn't know I had to go for an introduction. So what only thing I would add to what I said earlier is that I would say that I mentioned major trends change our societies that we fail sometime to really capture. And that has to do with what I said, demographics, huge in this Sahel, and linked to it, the lack or failure of education to capture that. Education also, an education that would help make these young ones, or these big bulls, employable. Secondly, I would say something we don't look at the way we should, is a rapid urbanization in the Sahel. I've been working with our friends of OECD Club Sahel in Paris, Mr. Bossard and his team, and they've been coming back and forth on the issue of the fact that the cities are growing at a speed that males who are in charge can't really tackle, and they're not working properly with the state to do that. So if you take the case of Niamey, the capital of Niger, if I go back 15 years to now, I see that the city has grown, let's say 3 times. Huge problem, and there is no, these cities don't create jobs, there is no industry. It's true there, it's true elsewhere also in the Sahel. So these are things that we have to be looking into so that we think and act differently, as I said earlier, to create a shared prosperity in this region. Mobility. I mean, you know, from one place to the other, it's actually two days for any young Sahelian rural areas to reach the capital, no matter where he is, just by riding a motor. And finally, these motors are also being used for something else, terror. And in passing, they also do something else. They raise taxes, they impose what they call, I forgot the name in Arabic again, shame on me, but taxes on the people. They also do what they do best, is it take from my people, take the cows and sheep and whatever you can think of. And that's something terribly new in this environment. And finally, I would say that one of the things that we really have to be looking into also, that governance-wise, then one of my colleagues mentioned somehow loyalty. We do have a totally divided loyalty because social contract is broken between the states and the people. And that loyalty takes us also to the other issue of people believing more in groups that are closer to them, that would enable them to go and cultivate their fields, or to take their cows to grass. So in a nutshell, that's what more or less what I said earlier. Marginal development in many areas, so state is not really there, as Ovis said. The demographic has to be taken into consideration. Mobility is an issue, and added education. We have to, all partners and countries alike, pay more attention to the type of education we are imparting. So I'll stop at that, because as I said earlier, jump and discuss actually this question of yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Sidikou. EU Special Representative Del Rey, welcome to the Sahel. And again, congratulations on your appointment. A change of the guard always brings new opportunities for leadership. International stabilization efforts need to reflect the demands of Sahelian governments and prioritize the democratic aspirations of the populations. At this juncture, the priorities of the international and Sahelian governments do not seem to align with those of the Sahelian populations. What are the European Union's interests and priorities in the Sahel, and how does the EU plan to align them with the interests and priorities of the Sahelian populations? Thank you.
Thank you for this important question. I obviously want to say immediately that the interest of the European Union and the priorities are certainly aligned with those of the populations of Sahel. As I mentioned at the beginning, there has been what I call a revolution, a conceptual revolution a few years ago, by which we started calling countries that once were the beneficiaries, now we call them partners, which means that, of course, we share the same future, and of course we have to cooperate to realize our projects, and we need to consult and to work together to define policies. This is not to be underestimated, because it's a very important, I would say, political capital on which we can build very good policies for the future. As I mentioned, we have a new European Union strategy for the Sahel, and I want to tell you that in order to do so, to implement it, we have annual action plans and also multi-annual indicative programs that are defined in collaboration with the countries of the Sahel and also with the regional institutions, mainly, of course, the G5 Sahel. Our annual action plans and multi-annual indicative programs follow a specific framework that is called CAPI, Cadre d'Action Prioritaire Intégré, which has been adopted by the G5 Sahel. There are also other organizations that participate, such as ECOWAS, the African Union, the United Nations, and of course they contribute to the strategy in their roles as external stakeholders. I just want to point out under the political aspect that the focus of all these these efforts is really on governance. Because, as I mentioned before, we need to rebuild trust between the governments and the population. You were asking me whether there was a distinction between the views of the governments and that of the population. In reality, we are working in this sense, trying to use very many instruments at our disposal, financial and also operational. And of course, this is all related to the fact that our approach is truly holistic, truly integrated, because we intervene in all sectors from, for instance, basic social services to justice, to democratization, fiscal transparency, which is important, economic resilience, infrastructures, and so on. This ensures also the fact that we have a long-term perspective, which is not to be underestimated, and also a wide range, so a wide spectrum. So I just conclude by saying that, of course, the aim is that of realizing the famous nexus between security and development, because, of course, we are investing a lot in security necessarily, but we are also investing a huge amount of money and also energy in projects and so on in the development sector. So I want to tell you that, of course, this is an historical moment for the Sahel in which the population is really showing a lot of ferment in each country, I would say, and the fact is that they are ready for changement. They want to accelerate history, and I think that we are there to help them because, of course, the fact that we are focusing on governance is the only true solution to be sure that what we are doing is really sustainable in the future, because we cannot allow, for instance, jihadist groups or armed groups to fill the void that is left by governance by providing alternative systems of welfare that, of course, are destroying completely the real textile of the society. So I'm sure that the European Union is going in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Special Representative Del Rey. Das Gonzalez, speaking of the changing of the guard, U.S. engagement in the Sahel has been heavily affected by domestic politics, shifting greatly throughout the Obama and Trump years. Today, the fast-changing dynamics on the ground call for greater and better coordination among partners, which all of you have referred to in one way or another. How does the Biden administration see its role, if any, in the stabilization of the Sahel, and what are U.S. priorities in the region?
Great. Thank you for the question. I think we see our role as to apply our unique capabilities and our comparative advantages, like I said, to enable support and build the capacity, particularly of our Sahelian, but also our broader international partners, so that collectively we're more effective towards achieving our common objectives and effective in a sustainable way. In terms of our priorities, I think it takes multiple layers. It's a multi-dimensional challenge requiring a multi-dimensional response. I would also echo what Emanuela said of focusing first and primarily on the governance at two levels, at the national level, certainly in terms of national systems, institutions, and structures for governance, for development, and for economic growth, so that there is economic opportunity and the public can see a bright future that they can understand is in reach. But also governance at the local level, so that local officials are credible, deliver the services that the populations need and expect, whether it's health and education or basic security, as well as resilience and the opportunity for, again, economic wherewithal and sound economic stability for local populations. while the long-term solution, I fundamentally believe, is in the development and the governance, it is also a manifestation of a security problem today. And so we will continue to prioritize security interventions, again, with an emphasis on that capacity building. And then finally, there are far too many people across the Sahel that are suffering, and a priority of the United States has always been and will continue to be responding to the humanitarian crisis and providing the food security and the other relief that is needed for the people of the Sahel. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Das Gonzalez. We'll move to a second round of our questions here. If we can each take, you, ambassadors and special envoy and Das, 2 minutes to answer the second round, so that by 10:45 we can open it for the audience. Will appreciate it. So the shorter the better. Ambassador Sidikou, back to you. You have had different perspectives into the crisis, having served with the government of Niger, the G5 Sahel, and now the African Union. Earlier, I mentioned your UN position. The larger the contingency, the more difficult it is to coordinate international engagement. In your view, what are the main obstacles to an effective coordination among the stakeholders, Sahelian states, donor countries, civil society, and how should stakeholders refine coordination effort? Thank you, sir.
No, thank you so much. Let me just go straight and try to respond to this question. For me, the first obstacle is to think that Sahelian stakeholders are not driving the response. Let me give you an example. In, I think it's September 2018, one Yakuba Sawadogo, a citizen from Burkina Faso, won the Sweden's Alternative Nobel Prize. After about 4 decades of determined action, Sawadogo, a farmer, popularized an ancient farming technique to reverse the desertification in his country and in Niger, for that matter. But the truth is, he was almost unknown in the Sahel. We have to correct the perception then that Sahelian stakeholders are not driving response. Secondly, second obstacle is to prefer, let's say, imported expertise to local solutions. As safety and security become an increasing concern, of course, for our international stakeholders or partners, Sahelian graduates and professionals must be hired for the sake of efficiency and fairness, simply fairness, especially when unemployment is so high, as I mentioned earlier, regarding rapid urbanization and its consequences. In a nutshell, I think we need to adapt to another world where, for example, young insurgents communicate through WhatsApp, so-called beneficiaries rate international NGOs and agencies, and African institutions, financial institutions in particular, fund successful and what we call street smart pilot interventions, and we have cases regarding our support, support G5 initiatives by YM, UMOA, with mayors of different places, places like Dori, Gao, and Chilaberi, Niger, where the African Development Bank, of course, so instrumental in helping health system locally combat the COVID, etc. We also know that armies suffer from an asymmetric guerrilla. So then we need to be careful and stop thinking that the bigger the project, the better the outcome. At times, less is really more. And Emanuela gave examples of work being done with the G5 Sahel and Alliance Sahel and others, precisely in targeted areas, in targeted environments, to enable the local level to be really leading the game. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
You're welcome, Ambassador Sidikou. Thank you. Special Representative Emanuela Del Rey, from Chad to Niger to Mali, democratic backsliding is a major challenge that will not abate anytime soon, considering regional trends. Military coups and constitutional coups, which seem to be fashionable in the region nowadays, stem from the failure of the social contract, with the consequences that have brought us here. How does the EU chart a policy course that balances security concerns and the population demand for governance reforms and unequivocally supports democratization? Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, I will start by saying that security, governance, especially the reforms and democratization are not competing objectives. I would say that they are interconnected, they are interdependent. We are all aware of this. So we need to pursue all objectives and at the same time, actually, and not forget any of them, of course. I want to say that in this view, for what you have just mentioned, of course, the temporal dimension is very important. Also the fact that we have to recognize that there are many intervening variables in the different social economic processes in the region that determine the fact that there are different evolutions in each sector. We cannot judge everything with the same measure. There are areas such as agriculture, education. These all are very different. And of course, the most important thing is to ensure continuity, take into consideration the fact that the communities count on this support, not only on security aspects, but also on the constant presence. And especially, there is a very important objective that we should all consider, the fact that we are in the Sahel often driven in our interventions and decisions by emergency. And this is really sometimes avoiding, let's say, a more lucid view on the fact that we have to pass from emergency to real sustainable development. So we cannot certainly subordinate democratic or governance reforms to 100% safety situation. Otherwise, we wouldn't do anything. Of course, reforms and security improvement must go hand by hand in order to generate conditions for lasting political stability. I just want to say that we, as European Union, we are building an architecture that would actually is aimed at giving a strong impulse to the civilian surge, as well as, of course, working on security. You know that the integrated strategy of the European Union for the Sahel has the aim of also beyond achieving stability and prosperity, of course, wants to create a regional integration, which is fundamental. This is a political aspect, very important, especially through the G5 Sahel. And I want to tell you that there will be very soon an important G5 EU summit in which we will discuss these issues with the presence, of course, of our High Representative Representative Borrell. I want to say that this is when we can put together all the levels, the regional level, the local level, the community level even, the national level, and also, of course, the idea that a structure like the G5 Sahel is recognized that it is an important platform to promote reforms, while, of course, maintaining the ownership of its initiatives. So these are many challenges at political and operational level that we have to face. But the most important thing is that we keep oriented towards the idea that we have to realize the nexus between security and development, and especially come out of emergency to create sustainability. Sustainability, I think, honestly, is the challenge for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Special Representative Del Rey. Das Gonzalez, the last time we held this summit, the world was in the first or second semester of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that we're entering the third year, the effect of the pandemic on stabilization efforts is deep and wide and affects the capacity of both international partners and Sahelian states to address the security crisis. Beyond the security and democratization dimensions, what contingencies, be they public health, economic recovery, or climate related, has the United States put in place to support international stabilization efforts in the Sahel? Thank you, sir.
Great. Well, I'd pick up on Emanuela's last sentence that the sustainability is going to be key, and it's going to be a long-term effort. And in fact, so much of our efforts and the more than $4 billion of assistance that the United States has invested in the Sahel over the past 4 years alone go to just that, the longer-term stabilization and development efforts. You started your question highlighting COVID, and the United States is pleased to have contributed over 100 million doses of COVID vaccines across sub-Saharan Africa so far, with many more to come, and millions of those certainly going to the Sahel region. In terms of our longer-term stabilization and development efforts, I'll start with infrastructure. We're providing critical enabling infrastructure in the sectors of roads, water, agriculture, and electrification across the Sahel, often through MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, that will make a long-term lasting impact in the enabling environment for economic opportunity. Education and health services we provide to enable and support government at the national and local level to deliver those services, not only to make sure that they're there, but to improve also the quality, recognizing that a healthier population is better able to seize and create opportunities, and to make sure that that population sees that it is the government who is delivering that service, and bridge that civilian government gap that we often see. Lots of programming on community conflict mitigation and resolution programs that build citizens' relationships so they actually know their local officials, breaking down those barriers and improving communication and therefore government response. We focus a lot on agriculture sector, agricultural value chains, and climate smart agriculture to enhance productivity, domestic value addition to keep the value of what is produced in country, diversify nutrition and outputs so that a healthier, wealthier, and more resilient community thrives in the Sahel. And engagement on the business climate as well. We try to work with governments to foster an investment and trade environment that will attract international businesses and foster domestic businesses to create jobs, to provide that opportunity that the people so want, to diversify also those opportunities across the economy and at the local level, so that again, the population is vested in their future, and provide taxes to the government to further provide yet more services. So plenty of work across the security and democracy and governance sector, but also in that stabilization and development.
Thank you, Das Gonzalez. Thank you very much for all your contribution, dear panelists. I will now take questions from the audience, if a couple of them that time will allow us to do. The first question says, what potential is there for co-opting community leaders, local elders, and popular entertainment personalities to counter extremist messaging? And then there's a follow-up to that. You can also keep in mind, what programs are being considered for territories after recapture from extremists and the region post-Bellum in order to avoid a resurgence of extremism? All right, the floor is open. Any of you can take it.
If I may take the first one, regarding the potential of not only musicians, but also traditional religious leaders in combating violent extremism. There is I would say, examples, good ones, in many of our countries of what is being done in that domain. If you take Mauritania, that is from the beginning has really prioritized what I call the ideological dimension of fight against violent extremism. We have examples of successes, including what we call in French retourné, managed to have former extremists, hardcore ones actually, become advocates for more tolerant Islam, and even their imams or some of them calling prayers in mosque, and things are been going on well for so many years already. There's something to be done there. How do we measure how do you make sure that Islam itself is understood, is really learned the way it should be to avoid extremism based on that dimension, based on, let's say, ideology. So that example is there to be drawn from, to make sure that doctors of the faith are brought on board, and we have them all over. We also examples of countries helping the Sahel, like Morocco, train precisely imams and other groups to better understand what Islam is all about. On the other hand, if you take traditional chiefs, I'm sure folks may be listening to us in Niger, like EU Niger might be listening. There are examples of work not only in preventing spread of radicalization, but also even bringing on board traditional leaders to ensure that the right dimension that Ambassador Etienne was mentioning, or was it Ambassador EU in Washington, are taken into consideration, including the lot of women, or the situation of women, having traditional chiefs align, be champions for that. That's happening. So potential is there as well. Then the youth itself, G5 Sahel has great potential in that respect. It has a youth organization, the G5 Sahel Youth Organization, a platform, a women platform as well, but is doing its share in taking the right messages to a field, or to youth and to women. I think the issue that we're really facing here is one of consistency and, should I say, sustainability of action, and bringing on board and carrying along those organizations. And that is what is missing. So that's what I would say. Of course, I will never forget the work we've done in G5 Sahel with USAID, precisely to even clarify what we're talking about when we talk about extremism, when we talk about Sharia, when we talk about, just mention it with a lexicon, with courses, to just have an understanding of what it is that we talk about, not only at the local level, but even ourselves. Let me stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sidikou. Special Representative Del Rey.
Yes, very briefly, I would like to point out the fact that every program, every action, every activity that is done by the European Union on field in the Sahel is always decided with the local communities. I visited, for instance, a project in Burkina Faso. The local chief was there with all the dignitaries and so on, because it is shared, of course, with the people who live in a specific area, and they participate as well to the projects. So I would say that this is very important to say, because otherwise we don't have the real dimension of the number of actually the volume of engagement that we have in this sense. Of course, I want to take up what Maman was just saying, because interreligious dialogue, I've worked in this field for 30 years. I think that in the Sahel is a particularly important driver. And so far, I know that religious organizations have been funding the activities of interreligious dialogue in each country. I think that we should instead take this opportunity, because it is working. I am in contact with all the groups of representatives of the different religions in the region, in each country, and I think that if we could put them all together, I think it could be a very important exercise, because it would help a dialogue in the population. I just conclude by saying that we have also to have an image of the Sahel as a very lively society. Communities organize themselves. I'll just give you an example. Les femmes juristes, the women jurists or lawyers who actually organize themselves, they do it pro bono, and they help against domestic violence. They are engaged at the community level. I think that these things are examples of the fact that this is in the Sahel, and I just generalized, but it is true for each country, I have to say, because I know each country, there is a great ability to produce ideas and produce actions and produce activities, and they have an impact on the society. This obviously means that we should exploit this capability also to create programs for territories that have been recaptured from the jihadists or armed groups in general. Of course, there is all the will in the world. Sometimes what is missing is the means, the concrete means. So we are here to provide the opportunity for those who are really creating and making the difference to realize their ideas. And I think that we should all work in this direction. I'm sure that Michael will agree with me, certainly.
I certainly do. Let me respond to the second question about how do we avoid a repeat once territories are cleared or people are returned. And I think this is really vital. This is where that nexus and coordination and communication between this military or security side of activities and the civilian side really needs to be coming through, because I think we've seen throughout the Sahel, there are plenty of examples of where security efforts are able to clear territory. But then the civilian presence is not there, not ready, or doesn't have the skills or resources to enable the state and the local population to hold that territory. And so by more close coordination, it's going to take time, it's going to take communication and planning, that can really improve to ensure that as a territory is cleared, or as people, IDPs, are returned to their territory, that there are administrators with the right local knowledge, skills, perspective, and resources who can ensure that that public is supported with things like security, education, justice, food. If they've been gone for a planting season, it's going to take time for their new crop. And that's also where not only is it a nexus of communication between security and civilians, but with those, the development partners, to make sure that we can provide the resources, the know-how, the best practices from elsewhere, so that when the people come back, when the territory is held, or is cleared, there's the ability to hold it. We have good examples from around the world, and our Sahelian partners are not alone in this. They recognize this challenge, as particularly as the G5 focused on this concept of a civilian surge last year. We just need to better enable it and better support it.
Thank you to you all. One more question. This has to do with NGOs. NGOs have frequently been raised as potential enduring successors for encouraging an amelioration of the current situation of the Sahel. Is there an opening for these organizations to play an increasing role in the coordination of support for re-democratization of Sahel states and improvement of the security situation in the region? Thank you. If we can take 1 minute each, if all of you want to react.
Maybe 30 seconds, if I may. I would say, which NGOs are we talking about? Are we thinking about also local associations and local NGOs working in partnership with international ones? And then, if that's the case, what is the acceptance by international NGOs, by the state, etc.? Because that's also an issue sometimes that you have to be dealing with. My own sense is what I see, for example, a crisis ongoing here. The best way to really go around the difficulty is to ensure that, again, local knowledge, local agency is more on the forefront. And I know actually of NGOs, international ones, including Nordic ones, that work very closely with local NGOs and local associations, and that always make a difference because people see what it is that we talk about. And that also trigger or work on ensuring that governance issues are always considered when we discuss that, when we have this kind of partnership. I mean by that usually international NGOs and local NGOs working together means simply we bring a little bit of cash and you do hard work. But the thinking through the processes, the issues having to do with thinking around issues of decentralization and evolution are not that much taken on board or discussed, so that there is something left behind in terms of reflecting on the issues and get, say, the input of the locals. I would keep it at that. I mean, I was surprised. I thought coming at this meeting, given what's going on in Mali, I would have questions about that. I'm happy I didn't have a question. I was ready to respond. But I'm sure that's also out there in the minds of people like Mike, and I'm sure somehow Emanuela, even if she doesn't say it. Merci.
I'd like to echo Maman's point about local knowledge. I think this is really vital. The local and traditional organizations, justice and religious leaders in particular, they know their communities, they know the people, they know their needs, and they have credibility. And I think as we talk about the return of the state, the onus is not just on the officialdom of the state coming from the capital, but rather needs to look at and recognize those traditional leaders and institutions as assets and partners who can bolster their own credibility. And in terms of NGOs specifically, again, I think this is really useful, because if we talk about governance and the credibility that the state has with the local population, NGOs can and frankly should be part of the solution, because they provide a lot of that bridge. They help communicate to the state what the public is needing, feeling, and demanding. And by having clear and open communication in both directions of expressing those needs, as well as communicating back to the public what the state is doing, I think we can help bridge that divide.
Well, I of course share everything that has been said by Maman and by Mike, but I can add one thing. One thing is the fact that we forget that some of these NGOs have been on field in the Sahel for decades. This means that the relationship with the population is very strong, consolidated, and it's really become somehow part of the everyday life of the populations of Sahel. Let's not forget this, because we have to recognize the incredible engagement of these people in working with the people of Sahel. Number two, we must not forget that most of the interventions of these NGOs has really ensured survival of some communities, especially in emergencies and in difficult times, which means that the relationship between them and the population is really very strong. Third point is the fact that, as it has been already mentioned, there is there is a mutually beneficial relationship. But the most important thing, in my view, at the moment, if we want to talk about the year 2022, is the fact that the relationship with NGOs on field for the local communities is the way of participating in the global debate. Sometimes I feel a bit irritated, if I can say so, by the fact that people think that because people of the Sahel possess a telephone and can look into social media, this means that they are part of the global debate. I don't think so. I think that unfortunately this is not true yet, but we must work for that, because we need to have the Africans and especially the Sahelians in our global debate. And I must tell you that in this sense, the NGOs are really contributing, because they offer an opportunity to open a window. And this is, I think, one of the most important results that we can obtain by keeping the NGOs on, in the countries of the Sahel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is all we could take today. So I would like to, first of all, put information there for our audience. On the event page, there is a button for the people in the audience to put their questions, which we did. So I would like at this moment to thank our speakers, our panelists, but also I would like to remind you that there is a button at the end where there's a survey for you to on the event page that you can fill, and we'd like to thank our partners at the European Union for making this event possible and for the generous support. Our partner value your feedback and will really appreciate it if you will fill out a brief 4-question survey. You can find that link on our page, the invite page, the event page that you registered from. Thank you again to our panelists, Ambassador Sidiku, Special Representative Del Rey, Dasmai Gonzalez, Ambassadors Etienne and Lambrinidis. Thank you. So
and thank you to you, Chair, for an excellent work. Thank you very much. Goodbye to everybody. Ciao, Maman. Ciao, Mike.
Bye. Thank you.